Hey everyone, welcome to the channel. Before we get started, don't forget to like and subscribe. Also, drop a comment letting us know where you're watching from and what time it is there. That way, YouTube will keep showing you more stories like this. Now, let's begin. I am Brian, an ordinary office worker living alone in a small apartment on the outskirts of Minnesota. My apartment is on the second floor of an old apartment building. It's nothing special, but it provides comfort after long, tiring work hours. My life was very peaceful until a week ago, when an event changed everything. That day, I came home after work, hoping to relax in front of the TV, watch my favorite show, and have some snacks. It was the time of day I looked forward to the most. But the first thing I saw was the front door forced open, the hinge almost completely broken. My apartment was in chaos. The most valuable items were gone, including my favorite TV. I sat down heavily on the chair, overwhelmed with shock and anger. I had worked hard to buy those things, and now they were gone as if they had never existed. I immediately called the police and reported the incident. They came, took notes, and advised me that the chances of recovering my belongings were very low. I feel powerless, but try to accept reality. I didn't want the house to remain empty, so I decided to buy a new TV. I turned to Craigslist, where I used to shop for cheap second-hand items. I spent the whole evening scrolling through a series of posts until an ad made me stop. The TV being sold was identical to the one I had just lost, from the size, brand, to the small scratch on the bottom right corner. What was even stranger was that the price was very low, and the address was not far from where I live. A strange feeling arose in me, half doubt, half curiosity. The next morning I contacted the seller and arranged to meet. The house was located in a remote area, with only a few scattered houses around, and the rest was forest. A cold atmosphere enveloped the area, and sunlight struggled to penetrate through the dense tree canopy. When I arrived, a man in his 40s opened the door. He was tall and thin, with messy hair, and his sharp eyes stared at me as if assessing every movement. I stepped in, and the TV was placed right in the middle of the living room. My heart raced as I noticed the distinctive scratch on the corner of the TV. It was exactly mine. I tried to remain calm, pretending to examine it. He took me on a tour of the house, pointing out a few other items he wanted to sell. But the more I looked, the more stunned I became. The black Bluetooth speaker, the antique clock, and even my collection of movie DVDs were all there. I felt a surge of anger, but unease held back my impulse. I made an excuse to leave, but just as I was about to head for the door, the man suddenly stood in my way. He pulled a gun from his belt, his cold eyes seeming to pierce through me. He snarled a warning not to come back or tell anyone what I had seen. My whole body froze, and cold sweat poured down. I nodded, trying to leave without showing the fear that was drowning me. Once home, I immediately called the police. I told them everything, but they said they needed more time to gather evidence before executing a search warrant. I spent the whole day worried, not taking my eyes off the window and checking the door latch multiple times. The feeling of being threatened haunted me, but there was nothing I could do except wait. That night, the silence was so deep that I could hear the wind whistling through the crack in the door. Suddenly, a strange sound came from the kitchen window. I turned off the lights, tried to stay silent, and moved toward the source of the sound. In the dim light from the street lamp, I saw a figure trying to pry open the window. It was the man who sold the TV. In his hand gleamed the steel of a large knife. My heart was pounding, and my body felt frozen. I quickly hid behind the sofa and pulled out my phone to call 911. My voice trembled as I tried to stay calm, not wanting to be detected. Meanwhile, the sound of breaking glass echoed. He had entered the house. I could hear his heavy footsteps getting closer, each step pounding like a blow to my chest. The sound of the knife scraping against the glass table echoed, screeching in a chilling manner. I held my breath, not daring to move. But just at that moment, the sound of police sirens echoed outside. The man panicked, turning and running toward the window. But as soon as he jumped into the yard, the police had surrounded him. I collapsed, my whole body trembling uncontrollably. The police reassured me and led me out of the house. The man was handcuffed, his eyes filled with rage and madness. Even so, I felt a sense of relief knowing that he would no longer have the chance to threaten me or anyone else. The next day, I received a notification from the police that they had found all the stolen items in his house, including my TV. I breathed a sigh of relief, but that terrible night haunted me forever. Since then, I have never dared to use Craigslist again, and always remind myself that safety is more important than any item. I am Chris, 32 years old, a normal man living in the suburbs of Detroit, with my wife and young son. My family's life is not wealthy, but we always try to keep everything stable and, even in difficult times, we still give each other warmth. To save money, I often sell items I no longer need on Craigslist. That was how I started a chain of horrifying events I never imagined. Last week, my wife and I decided to sell our old TV to get some money to buy a new gaming console as a birthday gift for our son. The TV was still working well, and I believed selling it would be quick. I took a few pictures, posted them on Craigslist with my contact information, and waited. A man named Toby messaged me inquiring about the item just a few hours after the post went live. He seemed very enthusiastic, asking many details about the TV. After a few messages back and forth, we agreed to meet in the parking lot of a convenience store near my house in the evening. Toby said that he was busy working during the day and could only meet in the evening. Feeling slightly inconvenienced by the timing, but wanting to sell quickly, I agreed. That evening, darkness fell faster than usual, and a chilly atmosphere enveloped the area. My wife and I, along with our son, loaded the TV onto the back of our small truck and drove to the meeting point. When we arrived, the parking lot was quiet, with only a few cars scattered around. The neon lights cast long, shadowy silhouettes on the ground, making the scene even more chilling. As soon as we parked, a man walked up to us. He was tall and skinny, wearing a gray hoodie and old jeans, with deep-set eyes that stared at us without blinking. It was Toby. Toby said that his car was too small to carry the TV, so he suggested that we follow him to his house. "My house is just a few minutes away," he said in a calm tone. A sense of unease rose within me, but my wife, with a trusting look, gently reassured me that this was probably just a normal transaction. I reluctantly agreed and followed Toby's car. We turned onto a narrow road, flanked by tall trees, with streetlights flickering as if about to go out. The cold air seeped through the cracks in the tightly closed windows and filled the car. When the car stopped, I realized the address Toby had led us to wasn't a regular house, but an abandoned building. The glass doors were shattered, with peeling paint and overgrown weeds spreading around the entrance. The light from our car's headlights was the only thing illuminating the area. Toby stepped out of the car and signaled for us to come closer. My heart began to race, and the palms of my hands were drenched in sweat. I turned to tell my wife and son to stay in the car, but Toby waved his hand, urging us to bring the TV inside. Reluctantly, my wife and I lifted the TV out of the car and followed Toby, while our son stayed inside the vehicle. As soon as we stepped onto the property, 3 figures suddenly appeared from the darkness. My wife and I stopped dead in our tracks at the same time. Without saying a word, we both understood each other's feelings in that moment. As they approached, we saw that they were 3 tall, menacing-looking men. 2 of them were holding guns, pointing them directly at us. My whole body froze, and my limbs felt completely drained of strength. My breath caught in my throat, and cold sweat ran down my spine. One of the men ordered us to stand still and hand over our phones and wallets. I felt like all the blood rushed to my head. My instinct to protect my family made me want to fight back, but my wife's fearful eyes and her trembling hand gripping mine were a silent plea. Stay calm. I slowly placed my phone and wallet on the ground, a wave of helplessness rising within me. In the car, my son began crying uncontrollably. The sound of my son's cries felt like a knife stabbing into my heart. I gritted my teeth, unable to do anything but pray that we would get out of this safely. Toby stood there with a smirk, quickly taking our TV, phones, and wallets. One of the other men kept threatening us, his gun trembling in his hand as if he were trying to control some impulsive urge. I didn't know what would happen next, but thinking of my wife and son, I tried to stay calm. Finally, after what felt like an eternity of tension, they disappeared into the darkness, taking everything with them. I collapsed to the ground, my whole body feeling drained of all energy. My wife held our son, who was crying uncontrollably, her face soaked with tears. I grabbed the spare phone hidden in the car and called the police. My voice trembled and choked as I recounted everything. The police arrived after about 20 minutes. They examined the scene, took statements, and promised to do their best to recover our belongings and catch the robbers. But looking at the dazed faces of my wife and son, I knew that the lost items no longer mattered. The only thing that mattered was that my family was still intact. That night, lying in the quiet apartment, I couldn't close my eyes. Every time I closed my eyes, the images of the guns, Toby's cold stare, and my son's cries resurfaced, haunting me. I blamed myself for putting my family in such a dangerous situation. It was a bitter lesson, reminding me to be cautious with any strangers. It reminded me that the safety of my family is more important than anything else. I am Julia, 24 years old, living alone in a small apartment in a quiet suburban area. As someone who lives quite frugally, I often use Craigslist to buy and sell second-hand items. Sometimes I read the Missed Connections section, where people write about fleeting moments with someone they missed the chance to connect with. I see it as an interesting way to kill time, reading strange or sometimes funny stories. One evening, while scrolling through Missed Connections, a post caught my eye. The headline was simple yet bizarre. The girl in the red coat at the supermarket near Elm Street. The post described a brown-haired girl with a ponytail, buying fruits and canned goods, exactly like what I had done that day. I felt a slight chill, but quickly brushed it off. It was probably just a coincidence, and I wasn't the only one with such appearance or habits. A few days later, I needed to buy some more items, so I went back to the familiar supermarket. The atmosphere in the supermarket was as usual, busy but not too crowded. I pushed the shopping cart through the aisles, picking out groceries, but throughout that time, I had the feeling that someone was watching me. When I turned around, I caught the gaze of a man standing a few meters away from me. He was thin, wearing a black hoodie with a pale face, deep-set eyes, and tightly pressed lips. He stood motionless, staring at me intently, as if he wanted to engrave my image into his mind. I pretended not to notice and quickly moved to another area, but every time I looked up, I saw him appearing nearby, always maintaining just enough distance to avoid being too obvious. A sense of fear began to creep in, and I decided to finish my shopping, pushing the cart faster and heading to the checkout. Once I reached the parking lot, the biting cold of the evening made me shiver slightly. As I was putting the bags in the trunk, I saw him again, standing near the exit of the parking lot, his eyes still fixed on me. I hurried into the car, locked the doors, and drove home. In my mind, I tried to reassure myself that he was probably just a strange person, and there was no need to overthink it. That night, as I sat on the bed, I opened Craigslist again, out of habit. This time, a new post appeared in the Missed Connections section. The headline made my blood run cold. The girl who left the supermarket tonight, driving the silver car. I nearly dropped my phone as I read the content of the post. He described exactly what I was wearing, how I looked around anxiously, and even wrote, "I want to be with you, just give me a chance." I couldn't believe my eyes. My whole body trembled, not knowing what to do. I thought about calling the police, but with just this evidence, it wouldn't be convincing enough. I decided to reply to the post, asking him to stop and warning that I would call the police if he continued. But deep down, I was worried that doing this might only make things worse. A few days later, everything calmed down. I didn't receive any further responses to my post. I began to think that maybe he had given up, but that peace was only temporary. One night, while watching TV in the living room, my phone vibrated with a new email notification. I opened it and almost dropped my phone. Attached to the email was a photo taken from outside the window, a picture of me sitting on the sofa. My heart was pounding, and cold sweat poured over me. I rushed to check all the windows and the front door, making sure they were locked. But before I could do anything else, a loud noise echoed from the living room window. The glass shattered, and a hand reached through, forcefully pulling the door open. I screamed in fear, ran to the bedroom, locked the door tightly, and called 911 in a panic. Police sirens echoed not long after. I heard the sound of footsteps running, and then everything became silent. When the police broke down the door, they announced that the intruder had escaped. I sat huddled on the bed, my whole body trembling, tears streaming down my face. The police found a sharp knife and several pieces of paper with scrawled writing left near the window. They were lines expressing his obsession with me. I couldn't stay in that house for another minute. The next day, I packed my things and moved in temporarily with a close friend in another city. But even after leaving that place, the feeling of being watched still haunted me. I always felt like someone was watching me from the shadows. Every time I heard footsteps behind me or saw a car slow down near me, I would jump and turn around, my heart racing. I deleted the Craigslist app and promised myself I would never open it again. This story is not only a warning about the hidden dangers online, but also a haunting that will forever be etched in my mind. I'm not sure I will ever feel safe again, no matter where I am. I am Maya, 24 years old, living alone in a modest apartment in Tulsa, Oklahoma. I am studying marketing and have been working for over a year. I often buy used furniture from many different sources. Thanks to that, I have saved quite a bit. Despite being used, some items are even 99% new. On weekends, I spend time cleaning the house. I noticed that my old wardrobe had a door fallen ajar. It was time for me to let that one retired. I would buy a new one, of course. a used one to cut down on costs. After cleaning, I took my phone and started searching. Very quickly, I found one that the owner had posted just a few hours ago. I messaged the owner to ask for more photos. After agreeing on the price, I decided to buy that wardrobe. The owner was even enthusiastic enough to offer to deliver it to my home without any extra shipping fees. Getting a satisfactory item made my spirits bright all day. About 2 hours later, the wardrobe was delivered. It truly matched my room perfectly. After finishing organizing my clothes, I closed it and even added some stickers for decoration. However, the right door popped open, probably because my clothes were a bit too much. I removed some items I no longer wore and stored them elsewhere. Now everything was fine. When it was time to go to sleep, I noticed the right wardrobe door was ajar again. I peered inside the items, then firmly tried to close the wardrobe door, followed by gently tugging on the handle. I changed into my pajama and went to sleep around 11 p.m. I don't remember when it was, but I was startled awake by a loud noise. The room seemed normal until I saw the wardrobe door ajar again. I felt a bit disappointed about the new item I had just purchased, but I steadied myself and went back to sleep. The next morning, I woke up, changed clothes, and closed the wardrobe door firmly again before heading to work. That evening when I returned home, I saw the wardrobe door open again. I changed into my pajamas and forgot the door. I would try not to let my mood be affected by such trivial matters. That night, I was startled when I heard a creaking sound from the wood. The first place I looked was the wardrobe, and as usual, the right door was ajar. I thought I needed to address this issue soon and go back to work. This time, I wore only one earphone instead of both. I heard someone breathing heavily. I turned off the music, took off the earphones and looked around the room, finding nothing unusual. By the end of work, it was nearly 2 a.m. I was so tired I could barely keep my eyes open. I lay down on my bed and fell asleep almost immediately. I felt a large, rough hand resting on my leg, gliding over my skin and slowly moving up to my thigh and advancing to that place. I jolted awake. It had only been a dream, but the feeling had felt very real. I was scared, but due to sleepiness, I wrapped myself tightly in my blanket and went back to sleep. The next morning, I drank a cup of strong coffee to help my body wake up. That evening, I went to bed at 9:30 after an exhausting day. This time, I dreamed of many hands touching my body, from my face, neck, chest, arms, and legs. When I woke up, everything was still normal. I sighed heavily, looking at the clock. It was nearly midnight, and I felt a bit hungry. I got out of bed to head to the kitchen. Passing by the wardrobe, I took a closer look at the stickers stuck on it. They had scratch marks, as if they had been clawed. While closely observing those stickers, I was startled to see a dark figure in the wardrobe. I rushed to the kitchen, grabbing the largest knife. Immediately, a strong force gripped my hair and yanked me back. A tall man, with a horrifying smile and a disgusting breath, held me tight. I struggled with all my strength, but with my frail power, he easily overpowered me. That crazy guy pulled me back into the bedroom. While he was off guard, I escaped and gifted him a deep cut on his arm. I had accidentally put him in a rage. After a struggle, he injured me on my hand and abdomen. My survival instinct wouldn't allow me to succumb. I used all my strength to kick him hard in the groin, causing him to howl in pain. I trembled and called the police. The first thing I told them was my home address. At this critical stage, every second counted. I had to run outside to seek help from my neighbor. Without letting me open the door, his large hand grabbed me again. I realized that it was the sensation of that large, rough hand that I had been assaulted by, not a dream. He dragged me under the bed, laughing eerily. I screamed aloud. This time I kicked hard at that dreadful face. He seemed dazed and loosened his grip. I scrambled up and dashed outside as fast as I could. Just then, the police arrived. I lost consciousness. I woke up to see my mother by my side, bursting into tears as she looked at me and thanked God. That pervert was the owner of the cabinet. He had been arrested and would soon face justice. I don't know how many girls had been assaulted by that madman before me. I made a mistake by not carefully checking the old cabinet, and I had a horrifying experience with buying old furniture.